welcome to the Bet on Her podcast. Today we have our first non-volleyball professional athlete representing the USA in aerial skiing. Welcome, Winter. Is it Vinecki?
Yep, Vinecki.
Welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So to our listeners, we have Winter Vinecki. She is quite the athletic prodigy. You've competed in the Olympic distance triathlons and became an Iron Kids national champion and ambassador. She's also set the world record for the youngest person to run a marathon on every continent. Then at the age of 12, you moved to Park City, Utah, to pursue aerial skiing and earned your spot on the U.S. ski team in 2016. And in 2021, you secured a gold medal at the Moscow Cup. And so you're also a philanthropist, published author, and skilled public speaker. And in 2022, published your memoir, Winter's Rise. How amazing is that?
That's just it's so cool. I mean,
Yeah.
You're so accomplished at at such a young age. You're probably in your mid 20s, and you
24 now.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, the thought of running a marathon when I was 9 years old, I can't even imagine. So I guess I kind of want to just know was what motivated that to even start doing marathons at such a young age.
Well, I started running races when I was 5, 6 years old. My mom and my uncle actually got me into running and triathlons. So we would go as a family to different races on the weekends in our motorhome when we lived in northern Michigan. And eventually I was like, I want to try it. I don't want to just watch my mom run. And so I started going on some runs with her, around our house and then down our street. And soon I was doing 5Ks. And then in northern Michigan, there weren't kids races. And so naturally I was just doing the adult races, running against the adults in 5Ks and then 10Ks. And I just loved the longer distances. I liked being able to run and explore and see where my feet could take me. And so I naturally gravitated towards longer and longer races. I remember I did my first 10-mile running race in Arizona for my 10th birthday. And then just shortly after that, I got into half marathons. And then the idea of the marathons all came about from looking through a Guinness Book of World Records. So just after I had finished my Olympic distance triathlon when I was 9, my dad passed away. So that was the last race my dad was ever at the finish line for. And I really was looking for something to do in his memory that was even bigger and better than the Olympic distance triathlon. And I was looking through the Guinness Book of World Records just at home on my couch, and it came across the youngest person to run a marathon on all 7 continents. And I had loved running longer distances and had wanted to do a marathon one day. And that just seemed like the perfect tribute to my dad and to be able to raise global awareness for prostate cancer. So I told my mom that I wanted to do it. Did not think we'd actually be able to travel around the world, because at this time I had been just going on road trips in Michigan and maybe a couple other states surrounding the area, but I hadn't even been across the whole US, let alone the world. But my mom is a very go-getter. And she started planning, figuring out if it was actually possible and when we would be able to do it. And so just a couple years later, we set out on this world marathon tour.
There's obviously some motivation there. And, I kind of want to get into a little bit about with your father and your relationship and the foundation that you started, because I think that's really amazing what you've done with it. So can you tell us a little bit more about that foundation and the money you've raised also?
Absolutely. So when my dad was first diagnosed with prostate cancer, he was 40 years old, which is very young for prostate cancer. It was a very rare and aggressive form. And at the time, there was just not much awareness for it. My brothers and I would go into the stores, we'd see pink ribbons everywhere, which is great for breast cancer, but we could never find a blue ribbon, which is the color of prostate cancer. So I decided I wanted to help raise awareness and raise funds for this disease that was affecting my dad. And the men didn't want to talk about it. So 9-year-old girl was going to talk about it for them. And so I formed a foundation, Team Winter, and started raising funds for prostate cancer awareness. It started locally, just in the races around our hometown in northern Michigan. And then soon I started racing across the U.S. as a part of the Iron Kids triathlon series. And I became the ambassador and encouraged other kids to lead an active, healthy, and positive lifestyle, but also to not only race for themselves, but for a cause. I didn't have to be prostate cancer like I was doing. I was just spreading my awareness for prostate cancer, but encouraging others, you know, if you have someone who has cancer or Alzheimer's, whatever it may be, to like do something for something you're passionate and have like that is close to your heart. And it was amazing seeing all the other kids start foundations on their own or raise awareness, or people racing in Team Winter clothing that we had designed with the blue ribbon out there. So with the help of all these athletes around the world, I was able to raise over $500,000 for the cause. And this has gone to mainly the Prostate Cancer Foundation. And they've used it to fund new young researchers who have developed new drugs to treat aggressive forms of prostate cancer like that my dad had.
You seem very busy then with all that you're doing, with all the travel, marathons. Obviously, are you competing right now for aerial skiing, or like where are you kind of at right now with season, if you've started, or what's your next event coming up?
So we just finished our season. So our season usually starts in November. Our first stop on tour is up in Finland, in Ruka, Finland. So we usually head up there second week of November, first week of November, and start on snow training, and then start our first World Cup of the year. And then this year we kind of bounced around to some stop here in the US in Deer Valley. Then we went over to Europe, went to Switzerland and Italy and the country of Georgia. Then went over to Kazakhstan and had a competition over in Canada. And so that's our World Cup tour. And so we just finished that a couple weeks ago. And now we're in a little bit of a break period here. I have about a couple weeks of relaxation and time where I can go spend with my family, and, you know, went on a vacation to Bali with some friends and family. And then in about 3-4 weeks, actually not even 2-3 weeks, we'll start our strength and conditioning camp. And then we'll do that for several weeks until we get ready to start water ramping, which is how we train all summer long till October.
Wow. That's the one where you go down and then you flip into the pool?
Yeah, so we go on these plastic ramps that are supposed to mimic as closely as they can to snow, and then we go off the jump, do a bunch of our flips and twists, and then land into the pool, which has a bubble system.
Oh my gosh. That is so fascinating. Like, the fact that you went from marathon running to then doing this, how do you go from like being on land to then just flying? Like, what's the mindset or the process? Because like, obviously Gina and I, we play beach volleyball, so we're diving. It's a little bit different. I mean, we're jumping, but we're not doing twists and turns in the air. So I guess from a mindset approach, like, how do you calm your brain while you're doing twists and turns? Like, how do you see the ground?
Yeah. So I always found it funny too, how I went from marathon running to aerial skiing. There was some kind of middle in between here that some people miss. So I was a ski racer growing up. So I grew up skiing and knew how to ski since I could walk practically. And I ski raced up until I switched to aerials. So I knew how to ski, but I didn't know how to flip, or like didn't have any acrobatic experience. I didn't do gymnastics. I didn't do trampoline. I literally had a backyard trampoline where every once in a while I would do a backflip with my mom holding like the back of my t-shirt, you know, and kind of helping flip me over. But that was about it. And so I had to learn all the flipping and twisting from scratch. But coming into the sport, I was 13 when I really started. And you're young and you're like adventurous, and, you know, you're not afraid of getting hurt. You're like very adaptable. And so I was just having like a good time learning and trying this new thing. And it was very challenging, but I love a good challenge. And so I thought it was so fun to be able to do this. And I loved the feeling of flipping through the air. But for sure, it can be scary. And the training is completely different from marathons. I mean, marathons were hours and hours of doing the same exact thing. And, you know, it's an endurance sport. It's cardiovascular. Aerial skiing, the whole jump lasts about 8 seconds from the time you turn your skis. It's not endurance at all. So it's very quick. It requires a lot more strength base. So, you know, we don't do much cardio training. We do a lot of lifting and strengthening in that way. And then obviously a lot of work on trampolines and things like that to work on that acrobatic awareness. But it can be a very scary sport. It's not like the nerves you have when you're getting ready to go do a marathon. Like, you want to do well when you're at the start of a marathon and hope your body feels good at the end. But when I'm standing at the top of the jump, it's like, I want to get to my feet, do this safely, but also do a really nice jump. So it's this interesting balance, and it's definitely taken a lot of mental training to be able to stand up there and be focused and ready to do my jumps, a lot of visualization to be able to picture basically in your head the jump you want to do. And sometimes it's tough. Like you go to visualize and you like, what if I do this? And what if this happens? And all these different factors, like a lot of that can creep in. And so working with like a sports psych and doing these other things to make sure you're in the right headspace at the top of the jump and can take those deep breaths to calm yourself down. Like deep breathing is like really important for me at the top of the jumps. Every single jump, no matter if it's training, competition, just regionally or at the Olympics, I take 3 deep breaths as I'm getting ready to hop turn to make sure that I'm present and not just like all flustered and then can't think about what I need to think about headed into the jump.
Do you have any self-talk prior to doing your jump?
Yep, a lot of it is taking those deep breaths, telling myself, you got this, you've trained like this 100 times. It's just another jump. That's like one thing I've had to work on over the years too, is like, we don't get very many competitions. We had 6 competitions this year. And so for the amount of training that we do, it's kind of crazy. And so it's easy to get really stressed out when we get to those few competitions. And it's like, all right, I have this like one comp of 5 to like prove all this hard work in this one competition. And that can be very overwhelming sometimes. And so taking a step back and just being like, okay, I don't have to do anything different. I've been doing it in training. It's the same thing. Like there's going to be that pressure that it's a competition, but just trying to still feel all the little feelings in my body that I need to be able to execute on the comp jumps.
It's hard for me to not compare like to our sport, or like we just recently went to our first LPGA event. And like for me as a volleyball player, like I'm going back to serve, I'm doing a lot of that same self-talk. It's like a moment where I have to like take a breath and really think about what I want to do with my serve. When we were at the LPGA event, the golfers, like they have so much time in between each stroke to really analyze and think about what they want to do. So it's like totally comparable. Also, the fact that you said you had 6 competitions, and we've got, same thing, like we're exerting so much of our time and commitment into training, where we have like basically 8 major events for the whole year, and that's it. I guess, how do you stay motivated with stuff like that? Because obviously I'm sure that you want more access and more just opportunities for you as an athlete in this sport. So kind of what do you hope for? Like, how do you stay motivated within those periods of time?
Obviously, we hope for more competitions every year. And this year, I think, was especially light. And the COVID years were kind of all a bit screwy. And so we're hoping to get, another competition back here in the U.S. In the next year or 2, maybe. And so getting some more countries to host events is going to be really important for us. And also just getting more young athletes into the sport. Like we have a small development pool right now. And so sharing about what aerial skiing is, because like when I heard about it, I didn't even know what aerial skiing was until I like watched videos, and I was like, oh gosh, what did I just like say that I was going to go try? But getting more people into the sport and getting more people to watch it, like all this helps to be able to get us more competitions. And as far as staying motivated, I love to compete, and that's like one of my favorite parts. And we don't get to do it that much, which is a bit of a bummer, but I still love snow jumping. Like I was a skier at heart, and so being able to jump on snow is so fun for me. And so even throughout the year, like especially this year, after last year being a very stressful year with Olympics and COVID and all that, this year we finally didn't have any COVID, like hard COVID rules. We were able to just take a step back and have a little bit more fun with it. And so I really just focused on being in the moment and enjoying being out there jumping. So even if it was a crazy weather day or whatever, if I wasn't jumping perfectly, I tried to just take a step back, have fun, as like hard as that is sometimes, but just to enjoy it, because I really do love snow jumping, and it goes by really fast, especially when we're jumping on snow from November to like March. And then we have so much water amping, and water amping is really important for us because we have to learn all of our new tricks into the pool, make sure we're safe in that environment first. But it also gets very tedious. Like from May till October, we climb stairs in all of our wet gear and are doing so much repetition of jumps to get it right and to make sure it's dialed in for snow, that by September, October, I'm ready for snow for sure. And so it's kind of just keeping that in mind when we're in the middle of those hard times on the water ramps. Like all right, I'm getting ready to go on snow. And then the more effort I put in now, I know it'll be a lot easier on snow. We can have fun. I can get that feeling of landing that perfect jump to my feet because there's no other feeling like it.
So you've done skiing. You do, from what I've seen, snowboarding. You've done some snowboarding. And
I've done one day of snowboarding the last like 10 years, actually.
you also do some bouldering. Is that correct?
A little bit. So I love to do anything outdoor athletic related. And so it's nice to be able to cross train with some other things. And in the summer, especially here in Utah, where I live, I have so much access to everything. So I do, some mountain biking, go on hikes, do a little bit of bouldering. I've outdoor rock climbed a little bit, but I don't have enough time to like really figure out what I'm doing out there. So I'll go with friends who do know what they're doing. But anything outdoors, I'm totally game for.
I mean, you seem like a really well-rounded athlete.
I think that came from just growing up in a household with 3 brothers, honestly. Like, we were always doing different things, and like, it's kind of funny. We laugh about it now, but like, if my brother wanted to do soccer, all right, we were all trying it at least like once, because you never knew what you were going to be good at. And so I tried ballet, I tried soccer camps, I did basketball camps, I obviously did the skiing. I tried snowboarding more when I was younger, and just did all these different things to cross train and not get burned out at a young age, but also just to figure out what I loved and what I wanted to actually pursue. And so I think that kind of just stuck with me throughout my young adulthood here, and just wanting to try new things and keep having fun.
What's your ultimate goal, like moving forward? So like you've had all the success, and like now that you kind of have this time off, like what are like the next 3, 5, 10 years look like? Like what's the ultimate goal with what you're doing? Like is it Olympics? Is it I mean, like winning the gold,
trying another sport,
something more?
Yeah. So the kind of, I guess, next 4-year plan, I guess 3 or 4 years now, is the next Olympics in Italy. So really pushing towards that one to get on top of the podium at that Olympics. This last Olympics was my first one. It's a bit of an interesting environment with COVID and everything, and wasn't my best performance. So I kind of finished in the middle, and I know I'm capable of much more. And so over these next 3 years, I'm building to hopefully become one of the few American females to ever do triples on snow. So triple backflips off of it's a much bigger jump, and it's traditionally what most of the time the guys are competing. And there's only been one US girl in like the last 6 to 8 years, maybe even a little bit more, who's done them. And before that, it's been a while. And there's only like mainly 2 Australian girls who were doing them on World Cup this year, and 1 Kazakh girl. So there's not very many in the world who are doing this. And so that's why I'm really trying to build for that this summer, and for the years to come, to be able to do that on snow at the next Olympics. And after that, we'll see how the body's feeling and everything like that. Olympics might be here in Park City, Salt Lake in 2030. So who knows? Yeah. But I'm just going to continue to do this sport as long as I am enjoying it and my body feels good, and I feel like I can continue to push myself in the sport. Beyond that, it's kind of up in the air right now, but that's like the next several years at least.
Do you have a job outside of, the full-time job of being, an aerial skier? Are you coaching, or what else are you doing other than your nonprofit?
So I do kind of a mix of different things. I do a lot of public speaking, a lot of work with sponsors and companies. And then I work with a wellness company on helping people bridge the gap in what they should be eating and what they actually are eating. And then some little bit of coaching and jumping and things like that. But then really I was doing school up until 2021. So I graduated from the University of Utah. So I got my degree from there. And then in the next couple weeks, actually, I'm supposed to hear back from one of the first fully ABA accredited online law schools in the country. And so I'm hoping to get into that law school. And so that way I would be able to continue to pursue my aerials and go to law school at the same time, since it's fully online and fully accredited. So that's kind of one thing that's on the in the future here that I'm waiting to hear back on.
Let's pivot and talk about your book. Yeah. Winter's Rise.
So
go ahead and tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I always wanted to write this book, especially after the marathons, and all the adventures around all 7 continents, but also my story dealing with the loss of my dad to cancer at such a young age, and how I kind of used that as motivation for some of my things that I did. But one tough thing is getting a publisher. And so before I was an Olympian, everyone was like, oh, wait till you're an Olympian, wait till you're an Olympian, then maybe we'll publish and all this. And at some point in 2021, before I even found out I'd made the Olympic team or anything like that, I was like, screw that. Like, I want to get this story written. And like, if we go to the Olympics or not, like, it's still a story and it's still my journey. And so I ended up pretty much finishing most of the book, and then ended up making the Olympic team and going to Olympics. So that was kind of able to like finish the story up until that chapter. So it's a story of love, loss, grit, and glory. It goes through dealing with the loss of my dad to cancer, traveling around the world, running a marathon on all 7 continents, and then my journey to the Olympic stage.
Yeah, I want to read it because I know we're only touching the surface here, but I'm sure that there's a lot more. Like, I would love to hear more about the marathons too. Like, kind of going back to that, what was like your most memorable one, and then what was the toughest one, and like how did you like mentally overcome that? Because I'm sure that there was some maybe where there was like elevation or the terrain was really hard. So I kind of wanted to hear a little bit more about those marathons.
So I'm gonna start with the toughest one. My marathon in Peru was the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu.
Which
So this went
like elevation, right? It's like,
yes. So this goes over 3 mountain passes, one of which is called Dead Woman's Pass and goes to almost 14,000 feet. And it's all like stone steps going up this thing. It's like very up and down. We had to start at like 4 a.m. before the sun was even up. So the whole like first pass up this mountain and back was in the dark. And that was definitely the toughest one. I was the first overall female finisher, and I finished in 9 hours and like 18 minutes or something. So it was insanely difficult. I mean, it's literally labeled the toughest marathon in the world. We ended up doing this race mainly because we had such difficulty getting into races and finding race directors who would let me run the races because I was so young. And this one happened to be good with it. So we ended up running this marathon, and my mom was doing all the marathons with me too. So we were the first mother and daughter in the world to run these marathons. And when we found this one, my mom wasn't worried about me finishing, but she was worried about her. So she originally skipped over this one and tried to find another race. But sure enough, we ended back at this one. So that was the toughest for sure. Most memorable is tough because, I mean, if you read my book, all of them have so much cool stuff, and like some of them have a lot of history. Some of them have some other causes around them and like really cool stories behind the races and the areas that we were in. I think for me, it was really cool getting to go to Kenya. And that race specifically was for raising money to send young girls to secondary school so that they could get an education and they wouldn't just get married off. And so that was a really cool event, and getting to go into this school that was called Jaraja Academy and getting to meet these girls and then getting to race out there. And like I had a runner that was running with me part of the way from one of the local villages. And so there was a lot of memorable stuff, especially with that race.
That's cool. I think, and I kind of thinking about like your mother too, your relationship with her. I'm sure that she's been a mentor for you in your life. But I was wondering if there were any other mentors that you've had in your life that had relationships with or who have inspired you, because obviously you're so accomplished. So I kind of wanted to learn about anybody else in your life.
I mean, I think there's so many people. Like I could start going into so many people. Like it's really taken a village to help get me to where I am, from the people that would take me in and like let me live with them when I was doing triathlons at different stops, or like when I first moved to Park City here, I lived with a host family, the Izzos, and so they took me in as one of their own for the first year and a half I was out here because I was too young to live on my own and couldn't even drive yet. And then there's like my roommate who I ended up then moving in with when I was like 15, because I didn't have my driver's license yet. She taught me how to drive, and so her name is Mariah, and I've been best friends with her for almost a decade now. And so she's kind of been like that big sister figure in my life. And she was doing aerials for a while as well. And I mean, my family, like obviously is huge. Even besides my mom, I'm so close with my 3 brothers. And so they really help keep me grounded. And even when I'm having like super stressful situations or whatever it may be, like I know I can always just come to them and talk to them about whatever. Like if I'm having a really hard day training, I'll just call one of them or FaceTime one of them and talk about whatever, like whatever they're doing, something random in my life, just completely un-aerials related. And it kind of just calms me down and kind of keeps me going in a way. And so I think having those people in my life has been so crucial. And, you know, other teammates to be able to train with and motivate each other. And then my family back home, I mean, my grandpa got me into the sport of skiing to begin with, and, you know, my uncle into my running and triathlon. So it's like all these different people are like pieces of the puzzle.
You had a big support system, it sounds like, which is amazing.
For sure.
Yeah. I was reading up a little bit about you, but who's Emily Cook, and then what's your relationship with her?
Yeah, so Emily Cook was the one who first got me into aerial skiing.
Okay.
So I was at a Women's Sports Foundation event in New York City back in 2011, and I was receiving the Annika Inspiration Award for my work with my foundation and my athletics. She came up to me after I had received the award and saw on the big screen when they played a video of me doing some running and skiing and things like that. And she was like, "You're pretty tiny to be a ski racer. Why don't you come try my sport of aerials?" And so she literally invited me to come stay with her later that summer. This was in like October 2011. That next summer, I went out, stayed with her for the week, tried the sport. She kind of coached me in it, and then ended up falling in love with the sport. She was an athlete at the time too, so I was like kind of in the sport. She was on the national team at the time. I was on the development team, but in the sport at the same time. And then she ended up being my coach several years later when she retired, and then coached for the U.S. ski team for a couple years. And now she's got a little baby and off doing other things, but always is around whenever I need her.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, it's so important to have a good support system, especially being female athletes. You know, like we need our family, our friends, the coaches that have made impacts on us, teammates, etc. So that's great that you have that support system.
Yeah, it's really, really important, especially in like a sport that we do. Like there is so much fear involved in that, and like it is really tough out there sometimes. And so we need to have those people, like especially like specifically with the sports, you know, our teammates that you can go to, or like that you kind of buddy up with to train, and that you can, you know, go to the top of the jump and be like, "How is it?" And they'll give you the honest answer, and not just like, "Oh, I don't want to tell them," like, because I'm competing against them. So it's really cool to be able to have that support, since it is such a scary sport sometimes.
For sure.
Do they travel with you to every event during season, or what's that like when you're traveling?
Yeah, so we have a World Cup team, and so it's usually 10 people total, roughly 5 guys, 5 girls. Sometimes it's skewed 1 each way, but we travel all season together and go to every competition. So for our sport, men and women compete on the exact same sites at the same time, like every stop on tour.
Does your family get to travel with you, or do they go to all events, or are you kind of on your own?
No, so we go to some weird places. Like before everything with Russia, we had a lot of heavy stops in Russia. So we'd had like 3 different stops, one in like Siberia. Then we go to like Kazakhstan, and we would also go to like Belarus. And then we normally go to like China, Finland, now like Switzerland, Italy, which those are a bit nicer stops for us. But our families usually don't come to any of those with us. The ones that they do get to come to are like our home events. So like here in Park City, we have Deer Valley World Cup every year, which is a huge event and gets tons of spectators. And so that one, we really get all of our friends and families to be able to come out to that event to support us and watch.
Well, we might have to come to that. Your family, come.
It's a fun event, and it's paired with moguls, and usually dual moguls. And so it's like 3 days in a row packed with all this high flying action and fast moguls. And so it's really fun.
Yeah, we definitely need to come watch you compete and fly in the fall or whatever, when your season starts in November.
Yeah,
so how exciting.
Usually that's in like January, February.
Okay.
Next year.
I wanted to ask, so how do you come up with your, I don't want to say routine, but you're flipping. Like, how do you decide what you're going to do? Is it you that decides that, or your coach? Do you work together on that?
So in our sport, there's specific degree of difficulty, which is based on the amount of flips and twists you do. And so it's pretty set out. Like, you basically, when you start the sport, you know all the variations for the most part that you can do, because we don't do grabs because our jumps are so tall and steep and we're flipping and doing multiple flips. And so we have a different style than, say, your like slope style. And when you start out, you're doing like a single flip, and then you add a twist, and then you add more. And so it's kind of just building on that base that you get. And you have some flexibility once you get to the tricks where there's multiple twists in the flips, and then you can decide which order you want to do stuff. Sometimes you try them both and you figure out which one you're better at. For instance, there's this trick's called a double full full and a full double full. So two different tricks, each have 2 flips and 3 twists, but one of them does 2 flips in the first, or 2 twists in the first flip and 1 in the second, and then the other does 1 twist in the first flip and 2 in the second. So they're kind of flip flopped. I've done both on water, both on snow, but I tend to just like the double in better, and so I did that one and compete that one more, and like mainly train that one to get that one really dialed in. And then looking ahead to triples, that's kind of a decision, especially for girls, that you make individually, but also with your coach, if as long as, you know, you have a solid plan and they're on board, they think you have the background and the abilities and everything to be able to make that big step, because it is such a huge step and you have to want it because it is a big jump in the sport.
I mean, obviously you're saying, you know, you'd said that there's a lot of fear based with this sport, and kind of want to touch base more on the sports psych of things. Like, you know, you said you work with a sports psych, and like, I mean, I get nerves as an athlete still to this day, you know, like before a match or even in the middle of the match, if it's crunch time and we're, you know, the score is really close. So kind of talk about a little bit about the fear and how you, I mean, I know you said you know, you work on breathing and stuff, but maybe what are some things that you work on with your sports psych that athletes who are in high adrenaline sports like yourself could use to help overcome certain aspects of fear of their sport?
I think part of it comes from your motivation in doing it to begin with, because that, like, you may not be thinking about that directly when you're at the top of the hill, but all that stuff plays into that doubt and everything like that. And so if you're like in it for the wrong reasons, then that can make it significantly tougher to be able to have that clear head on competition day or whatever it may be. And I think part of it, like something that, you know, I've been working on, is figuring out if I need to be like super calm at the top of the hill, or if I need to like get pumped up and be more like aggressive and have that higher energy. And so it's something like even to this day, like I'm playing with, because I've progressed so far in this sport over the last decade doing it that, you know, at the end of the day, like I know how to do the good jumps, but it's doing the good jumps when it really counts. And that can be really hard. And like, I've certainly not completely figured that out, or I would, you know, have every competition I'd be winning and all this stuff. And so like, it's still something I'm working on to figure out, okay, like what exactly keywords do I need to be thinking about? And a lot of it for me, like I said, is trying to be present, because as soon as I start to worry about, oh my gosh, what if I'm going to mess up like I did in this comp, or like start thinking about other things, I'm not going to be able to think that quickly in those like couple seconds I have before I hit the jump about like feeling the feelings. And so coming into the jump, like I just have to calm myself right before, and then have those couple things of like actually feelings in my body, like feeling my toes gripping in my boots, my shoulders pulling back, and like watching my ski tips come off the jump. And so just having those couple things I can focus on so that I'm not focused on other things that may be like a huge distraction.
Man, it's so relatable.
Yeah, it is like every sport. I always like, it's funny because when I started this sport, it was really tough for me because coming from all my other sports, they were time-based. And then going into aerial skiing, it's a judge sport. And so, you know, they say not to compare yourself with others, but we literally have to. And it's tough in our sport because it is such a small group. And I'm competing with the people that I train with every day. So like my teammates, we're on a team, but it's an individual sport. And so when it comes competition day, like I'm trying to beat them, they're trying to beat me. So it's an interesting dynamic to figure out, but also we have to push each other every single day in training and, want that support. But it was tough coming into aerials because I was like, how am I supposed to like do this perfect jump at this exact same time, like in this 5 seconds I had? And I'm like this sport seems like so crazy to be able to do that. But then I started thinking about it more and I was like, okay, well, volleyball players, you have to nail that like serve or whatever, like when it counts. You may have like a couple more chances than we do in aerial skiing where we only have like 1 round qualifications sometimes, but still a whole game can come down to 1 serve. And then you have, like your gymnast in vault, like that's the same thing. So it's really so similar across the board. And it's like, some games might be a little bit longer and like the marathons might be a little bit longer, but even the training is similar. Like I'm doing the same thing over and over and over again. So in that sense, there's that mental endurance with aerials similar to what there would be in running.
I have a question. So when you're in a heat or whatever you call it, I'm not sure what the terminology is, but how many jumps do you get? You get 3? So then
we can get max of 3 in a whole competition usually. So our typical World Cup format, we get 1 jump qualification, and then based on that 1 jump, they take the top 12. If you don't make that top 12, you're cut. Your day is over. Like no more for you. Then they take that top 12, you move on to finals. The guys will do their qualifications in between. So girls usually have a couple hours, but then we retrain. We get like 3 training jumps again. Then we'll have up to 2 competition jumps. So you do 1, they cut to 6. If you're not in that 6, you're done for the day. If you're in the top 6, you do 1 more jump, and that makes the podium.
This is so fascinating because, like, you kind of have to be strategic in the sense of, like, you kind of have to full send it the first jump. Like, you're going to, like, stick and land it because then you, like, yeah, I guess what's that process like to, like, put everything into this 1 jump because you don't have the luxury of time or, like, Gina and I, we have the luxury of, like, well, if we don't get a high line or if we hit out, like we can always bounce back. Like we have another opportunity, like to score a point. But for your case, it's like, literally, it's like you step up to the blocks and once you go, like, this is it. It's do or die.
It's hard. Like qualifications is always, I'd say, one of the toughest rounds because it's like, if you don't land your qualification jump, your day is over. You don't even get the chance to train again and then have like another competition jump. And like for us, especially if you're going for like an overall or something, the points really drop off and you only get like a couple points if you don't make finals. And so it's like, it's not a good feeling not making finals. You're done for the day. You like sit around and you most of the time watch your other teammates, but like you're just on the sidelines. And so it's really sucky when you don't make finals. So it's like, it is the most stressful at the top of the hill. Because for some reason, then when you get into later rounds, I feel like you like settle in a little bit more and you're like, all right, like I'm still jumping the rest of the day. And like, now I can just focus on this and not like just trying to get to that later jumps. But it's also a lot of strategy because we're not allowed to repeat like in finals, like that second and third jump, you can't do the same. And so you have to kind of figure out, okay, in those later rounds, am I going to do my harder trick and try to get into that top 6 and guarantee that? Or am I going to do an easier trick and save my harder trick to get on the podium? But then I might not even make that top 6. So like, that's what I struggled with this year is I was doing a full, which is 2 flips and 2 twists in finals 1, which is our second jump. But then every once in a while I'd have like the slightest bobble or whatever. And since every single girl was pretty much doing this trick, it's so tight and the margins are so like slim for error that I would like end up in 7th. And that place sucks too, because then you're done. You don't get to do another jump. And so I ended up switching my order and my strategy and doing my harder trick, my double in that round, which I would land. I knew I was in. I'd go to finals, but then I'd only have a full left, which kind of then bites you in the butt sometimes because then I landed a nice full, but it just didn't have that degree of difficulty. So I like in Switzerland, I ended up in 4th just off the podium, but I still jumped to my ability and knew that I had executed my jumps well, which I was really happy with, even though sometimes, especially in a judge sport, it might not always completely pay off.
You're not aware what the other athletes, your competitors are flipping, right? You're not aware of what they're going to do.
you can get a sense for it based on like training, and we pretty much, once you figure out what you do that every comp. Like you might change it if the weather's really bad or something, but like as a whole we know. But some people were surprised that I like had switched my order in the later half of the tour, so like that was a little bit of a surprise, I think. But we also have to call our jumps right before our competition jump. So right before, like in a second before I go for my comp jump, everyone knows what I'm doing. They say my trick on the big screen so that the judges know what they're looking for.
It's like a game within a game. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
It's strategic in that way. And I guess like I want to ask a little bit about the subjectivity of it, right? So, you know, with beach volleyball, like the ball is either in or out. Maybe there's some subjective calls with the refs of like our hand setting or like if the ball really did hit the line. But like, have there been any controversies that you feel maybe judging has been a little subjective, favoritism, or like wasn't totally fair? Because, you know, you watch Olympics sports with gymnastics or other winter Olympic sports, you know, where it is a lot based on judges. So have you had any experiences like that?
I mean, they try to limit that by having 5 judge panels. So it's 5 judges. They throw out the high and the low, and then you have your middle. But there's, of course, some competitions or jumps where you're like surprised by the score. Like it can score weirdly low or weirdly high. So like one thing that I think always plays a factor, it shouldn't, and I feel like the judges try not to do it too, but it's just kind of like unconscious, is if it's like number 1 bib. Like if you have a high bib, they know who's going. And so it's like, sometimes you wonder if like they got a couple extra points just because they're number 1 bib, you know, and like they usually are really good. And so even if they have like a little something off, like they might still score really high. But like I said, that's kind of like an unconscious, I think, sometimes. So it's like you always want to have a high bib, especially because then it's like if you're like very last bib, or you're going first in the run order. That's another thing too, because like I feel like sometimes the judges need a little bit of warming up. So if you run dead first, they won't really have anything to compare it to, so that you might get a little bit of a low score. And as the round moves on, they'll be able to be like, okay, that was way better. Like that deserves more, or whatnot. And so there's a bit of a play, and it's like it'd be tough to be a judge, because especially if you're watching the same jump over and over again, and there is like a lot of biases that may pop up that they're trying to deal with. So it's interesting. Like it'd be interesting if they're like somehow because there's so much AI stuff around now, that if they like made it a little bit more like, I don't know, like analytical, like they're able to take, okay, it measures the height, it measures like these different angles, and do some stuff with that. And so even like this year, there was a little bit of controversy with one jump that was done, because they landed, and then as they were going down, they kind of caught an edge in the bottom curve and then crashed. And so like, right, but even before they like kind of finished and stopped. And so that's like some rule changes that are happening, because they're like, oh, well, they landed. And then some people are like, well, not really. They like fell right after they landed. And so with it being like a skiing sport, even though it's like very acrobatic heavy, they're having to make some adjustments to the rules for that.
I feel like I would just fall every time. I could never stick the landing, not a chance. You have like this daredevil-esque sign of that's like there's no fear of just like, I'm just gonna full send, and it's like so inspiring to see you like I've never skied or snowboard, I mean it's been so long, but like to see you have this like no fear, like I don't know, this
go-getter mentality.
It's contagious. It's really cool. And
I'd say it's not no fear. It's just the desire to push past the fear, and like that feeling that you get, whether it's the adrenaline or sense of accomplishment in knowing you were really scared, but still went and did it anyways.
To have all the experience you've had from such a young age of being physically and mentally challenged, to like, you seem so, you know, beyond your years, and when what you're doing now, that I feel like it sounds like you have a really great head on your shoulders. You know, you're only going to have more success in the future too, because sports like, you know, competing and training and like all of it, like I just feel like it sounds like you're going to have a lot of success. So it's really cool to get to learn more about that.
Yeah, now you have 3 new fans.
Yeah.
Love it.
you. It's gonna be super fun. Yeah.
Yeah, let me know.
Yeah, and then whenever you're out at the beach, Gina and Kelly can help you with some beach volleyball.
Yeah.
It's
I can
funny.
show you how to dive in the sand. We can show you how to dive in the sand, and you can kind of show us how to strap our boots on the ski.
Yeah. Well, people come and do aerials, like even little kids jump into the pool off the baby jump. So anytime you want to. But it's funny, even like around the Olympics, you're like, all right, if you had to do another Olympic sport, I always said beach volleyball. I am 5'4". I am not tall enough, but I love it. I like play all the time. I went to Cancun last spring with my brothers, and like every day at this resort, we were playing beach volleyball, getting other people play. And like when we were in quarantine, like the original like 6-week quarantine for COVID back in whatever it was, 2021, I think, or 2020. We were in quarantine in Texas with my cousins and family. We would have family volleyball games every night after, or like every evening after dinner. Like, I don't even remember how we had like 4-on-4. And so I love it. I love playing volleyball. I'm just not quite tall enough, or talented in that area, but it's so fun.
Yeah, these two are incredible athletes. Gina and Kelly, both of them have been playing for years.
Okay.
But they're what?
Love it.
Yeah, but they're amazing. I love them, and they're,
Thanks, Dana.
I don't know, they're also really inspiring. You are also extremely inspiring. I mean, I loved hearing your story and hearing everything about what you're up to and your foundation and all of that. And I think we're going to end it with this here, which is this question. How do you take a bet on yourself, or how have you taken a bet on yourself?
I think by pushing myself past my own boundaries and past what I even think I'm capable of. So having that fear, or having those self-doubts and saying, okay, I'm still going to do it anyways. I may still like have that self-doubt that I have to overcome and be like, am I even good enough? Am I, talented enough for this? Am I strong enough? All these other factors, but still have the courage to be like, all right, I'm going to take it one step at a time, one day at a time. I'm going to go after it. I might not make it, but I'm going to try, and I'm going to put myself out there in that way.
I'm going to just open the floor to you. If there's anything on your heart or mind that you want to share with us here on this call or with our listeners, the floor is yours.
I think I'd just love for you guys to follow along. My website is wintervinecki.com. You can find me on Instagram at wintervinecki, and also find my book on my website and wintersrise.com. For sure, check out that book. The Audible will be coming out soon as well, that I read. And so would love for you to hear my story, but also hopefully be inspired to chase after your dreams, because the book has a lot of everything I've learned and gone through, but I just hope to inspire the next generation to chase after their goals, but also empower them with the tools that they need to do so.
Thank you very much for agreeing to be on our little impromptu podcast. Normally we would have you come into the studio, but this is our first ever video recorded podcast. So I apologize for the technical difficulties that we had earlier. It was really great meeting you. Gina, Kelly, you have anything else to add?
No, just thank you so much.
Thanks for doing this. And like I said, we're going to come watch you at an event. So I'm pumped. And now we get to root for you.
Yeah.
Perfect. Win-win.